Imagine this. You're 7 months pregnant, blissfully in love with your millionaire husband. He kisses you goodbye for a crucial business trip, promising to be back before the baby comes. You're tracing the patterns on your swollen belly, dreaming of your future, when the phone rings. It's the hotel, a 5-star resort in the Maldives. But they're not calling about your husband's reservation. They're calling about his mistress. And the life you thought you had? It just shattered into a million pieces. What would you do? This is the story of Elena Marlowe and her journey through the ultimate betrayal. The scent of rain-washed roses and old money clung to the air in their Holland Park home, a scent Elena Marlowe had once found intoxicating. Now, at 7 months pregnant, it mostly just made her feel nauseous. She watched Julian Carrington knot his silk tie, the dark navy a stark contrast to his crisp white shirt. He was a portrait of effortless power, from the subtle glint of his Patek Philippe watch to the confident set of his jaw. He was a millionaire, a self-made titan in the world of finance, and he was her husband. "Are you sure you have to go, darling?" Elena asked, her voice a little breathier than she'd intended. She ran a hand over the curve of her stomach, a silent plea. The baby, a boy they'd already named Liam, kicked in response, a secret conversation between mother and child. Julian turned, his smile as devastatingly charming as the day they'd met. He crossed the cavernous bedroom in 3 long strides and knelt before her, pressing a kiss to her belly. "Just a few days, my love. This deal in Singapore is the culmination of a year's work. It'll secure Liam's future. And his future siblings' futures." He looked up at her, his eyes, the color of warm whiskey, full of sincerity. "I'll be back before you know it. FaceTime every night. I promise." Elena leaned into his touch, wanting to believe him, needing to. Their life was a fairy tale, or so everyone told them. The whirlwind romance, the lavish wedding featured in society magazines, the sprawling London townhouse, the promise of a perfect family. Julian had swept her off her feet, an art curator with a modest trust fund, and plunged her into a world of unimaginable wealth and influence. He was her protector, her provider, her everything. But lately, a tiny, insidious seed of doubt had taken root in her heart. It was in the little things. The late-night board meetings that stretched into the early hours, the second phone that was always kept locked and out of sight, the faint, unfamiliar scent of perfume on his collar a few weeks ago that he'd brushed off as a hug from a female colleague. She had chided herself for her suspicions, blaming them on pregnancy hormones and the anxieties of impending motherhood. Julian was a busy man, a powerful man. Of course, his life was complicated. "Just be safe," she whispered, her fingers tracing the sharp line of his jaw. "Always," he murmured, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was both passionate and fleeting. He stood, grabbing his sleek leather briefcase. "The car's waiting. I love you, Elena. More than anything." "I love you too," she said, the words feeling strangely hollow in the opulent room. She watched from the window as the chauffeur-driven Bentley purred away from the curb, disappearing into the drizzly London morning. The house suddenly felt immense, empty. Elena wandered through the silent, art-filled rooms, each painting and sculpture a testament to Julian's success and her own impeccable taste. She had curated their life as meticulously as she had curated any exhibition, every piece in its perfect place, creating an image of flawless harmony. But what if the frame was hiding a flawed canvas? She shook her head, trying to dispel the thought. She was being ridiculous. Julian loved her. He was working hard for them, for their baby. She settled onto a plush velvet sofa in the drawing room, picking up a book on motherhood she'd been meaning to read. But the words blurred on the page. Her mind kept drifting back to that other scent, a floral note she couldn't place. Jasmine, maybe? Or something more exotic. The days that followed were a study in distraction. Elena threw herself into preparing the nursery, a calming oasis of soft grays and creams. She had lunch with her sister, Clara Wells, who was blissfully unaware of Elena's burgeoning anxieties. "You're glowing, Elena," Clara had said, her own life a comfortable, predictable cycle of school runs and suburban drama. "Motherhood suits you." Elena had forced a smile. "It's all Julian. He's been spoiling me rotten." And he had. The deliveries were constant. Flowers, designer maternity wear, a ridiculous diamond bracelet that she'd felt too guilty to wear. It was as if he was trying to paper over something, to distract her with glittering baubles. The FaceTime calls were a nightly ritual. Julian would appear on her screen, looking tired but handsome, the generic backdrop of a hotel room behind him. He'd talk about the grueling negotiations, the difficult clients, the long hours. He'd ask about her day, about the baby, his voice a soothing balm on her frayed nerves. "I miss you so much," he'd said last night, his image pixelated, but his sincerity seemingly real. "I can't wait to be home with my two favorite people." Elena had clung to those words, repeating them to herself like a mantra. Everything was fine. She was just being paranoid. It was on the fourth day of his supposed trip to Singapore that the carefully constructed facade of her life began to crack. She was arranging a bouquet of lilies, their funereal scent suddenly cloying when the landline rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, an international code, probably a business call for Julian that had been misdirected. She answered, her voice polite, professional. "Julian Carrington's residence." "Good afternoon," a woman's voice, crisp and accented, replied. "I'm calling from the Ocean Pearl Resort in the Maldives. I'm trying to reach Mrs. Carrington." Elena's blood ran cold. The Maldives? Not Singapore. The discrepancy was a jolt, a sudden, sickening lurch in her gut. "This is she managed to say, her hand gripping the marble countertop for support. "Wonderful," the woman continued, oblivious to the bombshell she had just dropped. "I'm calling regarding your husband, Mr. Julian Carrington's. Stay with us. There's been a small issue with the credit card on file for the incidental charges. We were hoping to resolve it." The world tilted on its axis. "My husband is in the Maldives?" Elena asked, her voice a strangled whisper. "Yes, ma'am. He's checked into one of our grand water villas. A beautiful choice," the woman said brightly. A water villa. Elena had seen pictures of them, secluded, romantic, with private infinity pools and direct access to the turquoise lagoon. The kind of place you took a lover, not a business associate. "Incidental charges?" Elena asked, her mind racing, trying to make sense of the impossible. "Yes, for the spa treatments and the private beach dinner for two." "For two?" The air left Elena's lungs in a rush. The lilies swam before her eyes, their white petals blurring into a meaningless smear. The lie was so audacious, so complete. Not just a different city, but a different reality. He wasn't in sterile boardrooms in Singapore. He was in a tropical paradise, with someone else. "Mrs. Carrington, are you still there?" Elena couldn't speak. The seed of doubt had not just sprouted. It had grown into a monstrous, thorny vine, wrapping itself around her heart and squeezing until she could barely breathe. "There seems to be another name on the reservation," the woman continued, her tone now laced with a hint of confusion. "A Ms. Isadora Duval. Perhaps she is authorized to provide an alternative payment method?" Isadora Duval. The name was unfamiliar, yet it seared itself into Elena's brain. Isadora. The name of his mistress. The faceless woman who had been sharing her husband, her life, her future. Elena slowly lowered the receiver, her hand trembling. The silence of the grand house was no longer empty. It was filled with the deafening roar of betrayal. She looked around at the curated perfection of her home. at the symbols of her gilded cage, and saw them for what they were: a beautiful, elaborate lie. And she, the trusting wife, had been the prize exhibit. The baby kicked again, a sharp, insistent reminder of the innocent life caught in the crossfire of this devastating revelation. The fairy tale was over. A nightmare had just begun. The phone call ended, but the woman's voice, with its cheerful professional tone, echoed in the cavernous silence of the house. A Miss Isadora Duval. The name hung in the air, a poisonous vapor. Elena stood frozen in her kitchen, the marble countertop cold and unyielding beneath her trembling fingers. The scent of the lilies, once a symbol of purity and devotion, now seemed to mock her, their fragrance thick with the stench of deceit. Her first instinct was a primal scream, a raw, guttural cry to shatter the oppressive quiet and the perfect, polished surfaces of her life. But the sound caught in her throat, strangled by a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. She stumbled to the sink, her body heaving, but nothing came up. There was only a hollow, aching emptiness inside her. The Maldives. He was in the Maldives. Not in a stuffy boardroom in Singapore, poring over spreadsheets and legal documents. He was on a sun-drenched beach in a grand water villa with another woman. A woman named Isadora. The audacity of the lie was breathtaking. He had constructed an entirely different narrative for her, complete with nightly FaceTime calls from a generic hotel room, no doubt carefully staged to maintain the illusion. A cold, sharp clarity pierced through the initial shock. The second phone, the one he always kept locked, the one that never left his side. It was all so sickeningly clear now. The late nights, the vague excuses, the faint foreign scent of jasmine, it all clicked into place, forming a mosaic of betrayal that was as intricate as it was cruel. Her mind, usually so ordered and analytical, was a chaotic storm of questions. Who was she? How long had this been going on? Did he love her? The last question was a physical blow, knocking the wind out of her. She sank onto a kitchen chair, her hands instinctively cradling her belly, a protective gesture against a world that had suddenly become hostile and treacherous. Liam kicked, a gentle flutter, as if sensing his mother's distress. A fresh wave of pain washed over her. This wasn't just about her and Julian anymore. It was about this innocent life she was carrying. A life they had created together, supposedly in love. For a moment she considered calling him, screaming at him down the phone, demanding an explanation. But what would he do? Lie more? Deny everything? She couldn't bear it. She needed proof, irrefutable proof, before she confronted him. She needed to arm herself for the war that was about to begin. With a newfound, albeit fragile, resolve, Elena stood up. She walked through the silent house, each room a monument to their shared life, now tainted by his deception. Their wedding photos, displayed in ornate silver frames, seemed to mock her. Their smiling faces, a testament to a love that was now a lie. In their bedroom, his side of the bed was pristine, the pillows plumped, the duvet turned down, just as the housekeeper left it every morning. It was a sterile, untouched space, a reflection of the emptiness that now yawned between them. Her eyes fell on his study, a room she rarely entered, his private sanctuary. It was always kept locked when he was away, but she knew where he kept the spare key. In a small antique box on her vanity, a gift from him on their first anniversary. He had told her it was a symbol of his trust, that she held the key to his world. The irony was a bitter pill to swallow. Her hands shook as she retrieved the key. It felt heavy in her palm, a key to a Pandora's box she was terrified to open. But she had to know. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was dark and smelled of leather and his expensive cologne, a scent that now made her stomach churn. She flicked on the light, revealing a space that was the epitome of masculine power. A large mahogany desk, shelves lined with leather-bound books, a collection of antique maps on the walls. She didn't know what she was looking for. Love letters? Receipts? A clue to the identity of Isadora Duval? She started with his desk, her fingers fumbling as she opened the drawers. They were filled with files, contracts, business documents she didn't understand. It was also ordinary, so professional. For a moment, she allowed herself a sliver of hope. Maybe she had misunderstood. Maybe there was a rational explanation. Then she saw it. Tucked away at the back of the bottom drawer, a slim, leather-bound notebook. It was different from his other business journals. Smaller, more personal. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she picked it up. His initials, J.C., were embossed in gold on the cover. She hesitated for a second, the intimacy of reading his private thoughts feeling like a violation. But he had already violated their marriage, their vows, their life together. She opened it. The first few pages were filled with his familiar, confident script, notes on investments, stock market predictions. Then, about halfway through, the handwriting changed. It was still his, but more fluid, less formal. And the content? It was a diary of sorts, a record of his other life. Paris with I. The way the light catches her hair on the Pont des Arts. She makes me feel alive again. Weekend in Tuscany, endless vineyards and her laughter. Told E it was a banking conference in Frankfurt. She understands the pressures I'm under, the weight of my world. E just sees the money, the success. She doesn't see the man behind it. The words were like daggers to her heart. Isadora. He had been seeing her for months, maybe longer, weaving a tapestry of lies so intricate, so detailed, that she had never suspected a thing. He wasn't just having a sordid affair. He was living a double life. And his words about her, Elena, they cut the deepest. She just sees the money, the success. Was that how he saw her? As a shallow, materialistic woman who was only interested in his wealth? She thought back to their early days, before the millions, when he was just a fiercely ambitious analyst with big dreams. She had loved that man, believed in him, supported him. Had he forgotten that? Or had he just rewritten their history to justify his betrayal? She read on, her tears blurring the ink on the page. He wrote about Isadora's passion for art, her free spirit, her understanding of his complex soul. He painted a picture of a woman who was everything Elena was not. Or at least, everything he thought Elena was not. The power imbalance in their relationship had never been more apparent. He held all the cards, all the wealth, and with it, the power to create his own reality, to cast her in any role he chose. Then she found the entry about the Maldives. Booked the trip, the ocean pearl. A week of paradise with I before the baby comes. E will be in her 7th month, too uncomfortable to travel. The timing is perfect. A final escape before I'm tied down for good. Tied down. That's what she and their baby were to him. A trap. An obligation. The man she loved. The man who had promised to love and cherish her. Saw her and their unborn child as a cage. The notebook slipped from her numb fingers, landing with a soft thud on the plush carpet. The emotional fiction he had created for her was a lie. But this was the truth. His truth. And it was a truth that would change everything. She stood up, her movements slow, deliberate. The tears had stopped. In their place was a cold, hard anger, an anger that was terrifying in its intensity. He had underestimated her. He had seen her as a beautiful, docile accessory to his perfect life. He had never seen the woman underneath, the woman with a will of steel and a heart that, though broken, was far from defeated. She walked out of the study, leaving the notebook on the floor. She didn't need it anymore. The words were etched into her memory, a permanent scar on her soul. She went back to the kitchen and picked up her phone. She scrolled through her contacts until she found the name she was looking for. Clara, her sister. She needed her sister. "Elena, is everything okay?" Clara's voice was warm, concerned. "Can you come over?" Elena's voice was steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside her. "I need you." "Of course, I'm on my way." As she waited for Clara, Elena looked out at the rain-streaked garden. The roses, once a symbol of their love, now looked like they were weeping. The gilded cage had been shattered, its bars broken. And for the first time in a long time, Elena felt a flicker of something that wasn't fear or despair. It was a nascent sense of freedom, a terrifying, exhilarating freedom. The life she had known was over, but a new one, a life on her own terms, was just beginning. The psychological conflict had just begun, and she was ready to fight. Clara arrived within the hour, her face a mask of concern. She took one look at Elena's pale, tear-streaked face and enveloped her in a hug. "What is it? What's happened? Is it the baby?" Elena shook her head, pulling away. She led her sister into the drawing room, the opulent space feeling cold and impersonal. "The baby's fine," she said, her voice flat. "Julian's not in Singapore." Clara looked confused. "What do you mean?" "Of course he is. He's been calling you every night." "He's in the Maldives," Elena said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "With his mistress." The color drained from Clara's face. "What? Elena, that's insane. How do you know?" Elena recounted the phone call from the hotel. The name, Isadora Duval. The incidental charges for a private dinner for two. Then, her voice breaking, she told Clara about the notebook, about the double life Julian had been living. The trips to Paris and Tuscany, the cruel words he had written about her, the way he saw her and their baby as a trap. Clara listened in stunned silence, her hand covering her mouth. When Elena finished, there were tears in her sister's eyes. "That bastard," she whispered, her voice filled with a venom that was both comforting and startling to Elena. "That absolute lying bastard." For the first time since the phone call, Elena felt a sense of validation. She wasn't going crazy. Her suspicions hadn't been the product of pregnancy hormones. The betrayal was real, and it was as ugly as she had imagined. "What are you going to do?" Clara asked, her practical nature taking over. "Are you going to confront him? Leave him?" "I don't know," Elena admitted, her voice trembling. "I can't think straight. My whole world. It's just imploded." "Okay," Clara said, her tone firm. "First things first, we need to think strategically. He has all the money, all the power. You need to protect yourself, and you need to protect Liam." Clara was right. This wasn't just about a broken heart anymore. It was about survival. Julian was a formidable opponent, a man who was used to winning, to controlling every aspect of his life. He wouldn't give up his perfect family, his perfect image, without a fight. And he would use his wealth and influence to crush anyone who stood in his way. "I need a lawyer," Elena said, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. The thought of divorcing Julian, of dismantling the life they had built together, was terrifying. But the thought of staying with him, of living a lie, was unbearable. "A shark," Clara said, her eyes glinting with a fierce protectiveness. "The best divorce lawyer in London, someone who won't be intimidated by him." They spent the rest of the day in a whirlwind of activity. Clara, a force of nature when roused, took charge. She researched top family law firms, made discreet inquiries, and by evening had secured an appointment for Elena the following morning with a woman named Amara Shah, a notoriously tough litigator known for her work with high-net-worth divorces. While Clara was on the phone, Elena found herself wandering through the house, seeing it with new eyes. The expensive art, the designer furniture, the custom-made everything. It all felt like a movie set, a beautiful, empty backdrop for a life that was a sham. She had been a willing participant in the illusion, so seduced by the fairy tale that she had ignored the warning signs, the cracks in the facade. She thought about the power imbalance that had defined their relationship from the beginning. Julian, the self-made millionaire, had been her savior, rescuing her from a life of relative obscurity. She had been so grateful, so in awe of him, that she had allowed him to shape her world, to define her identity. She was Mrs. Julian Carrington, a name that opened doors, commanded respect, and came with a host of expectations. But who was Elena Marlowe? What did she want outside of him? She realized with a jolt that she didn't know anymore. Her phone buzzed, and her heart leaped into her throat. It was Julian, his face appearing on the screen for their nightly FaceTime call. For a moment, she was tempted to ignore it, to throw the phone against the wall. But then, a cold, calculated resolve settled over her. She would play his game. She would gather her strength, her evidence, and when she was ready, she would confront him on her own terms. She answered the call, arranging her face into a mask of weary affection. "Hi, darling," she said, her voice remarkably steady. "There's my beautiful girl," he said, his smile as warm and convincing as ever. The backdrop was the same generic hotel room. He was a masterful liar. "How are you feeling? How's our little champion?" "We're good," she said, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. "Just tired. Liam's been kicking up a storm today. He's impatient to meet his dad," Julian said, his voice laced with a faux tenderness that made her stomach clench. "I miss you both so much. This deal is taking forever. I can't wait to be home." "Me too," she said, her voice a little too tight. She had to end the call before she shattered into a million pieces. "I'm going to go to bed early, darling. I'm exhausted." "Of course, my love. Get some rest. I love you." "I love you too," she whispered, the words a hollow echo of a love that was now dead. She ended the call and let out a shuddering breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. The ease with which he lied, the sincerity in his eyes. It was terrifying. This was the man she had married, the man she was having a child with. A man who was a complete stranger to her. The next morning, Elena met with Amara Shah. The lawyer's office was sleek and modern, a world away from the chintzy, traditional firms Elena had imagined. Amara herself was a woman in her late 40s, immaculately dressed, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through Elena's carefully constructed composure. Elena told her everything, her voice low and steady as she recounted the story. From the phone call to the diary. She left out no detail, no matter how painful or humiliating. When she was finished, Amara was silent for a moment, her fingers steepled under her chin. "He's been careless," Amara said, her voice calm and measured. "The diary is a gift, a confession in his own handwriting. We can use it to prove adultery, which will give us leverage in the divorce settlement." The word divorce sent a fresh wave of panic through Elena, but Amara's confidence was a steadying force. "Your husband is a powerful man, Mrs. Carrington," Amara continued. "He will fight dirty. He will try to paint you as a gold digger, an unstable, hormonal pregnant woman. We need to be prepared for that." Amara then laid out a strategy that was both brilliant and ruthless. They would need to gather more evidence, document everything. She advised Elena to continue playing the role of the loving, unsuspecting wife. "Let him think he's in control," Amara said. "The more comfortable he is, the more mistakes he'll make." She also advised Elena to start quietly separating her finances to secure any personal assets she had before the marriage. The power imbalance was not just emotional, it was financial. Julian controlled their vast fortune, and he would not hesitate to use it as a weapon. Elena left the lawyer's office feeling both terrified and empowered. The path ahead was daunting, fraught with uncertainty and pain. But for the first time since the phone call, she had a plan. She was no longer a victim, waiting for the next blow to fall. She was a woman on the verge of taking back her life. That evening, as she prepared for Julian's nightly call, she felt a shift within herself. The hurt and the betrayal were still there, a raw, open wound in her soul. But they were now overlaid with a cold, hard anger. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was no longer the naive, trusting girl who had fallen in love with a millionaire. She was a woman who had been to hell and was just beginning to claw her way back. And she would not be defeated. The storm was gathering, and she was ready to face it. She would be the storm. The days that followed were a masterclass in deception. Elena, guided by Amara's counsel, became an actress worthy of an Oscar. She played the part of the devoted, slightly hormonal pregnant wife to perfection. She cooed over the baby clothes Julian had sent from Singapore, a ridiculously expensive collection of designer onesies and cashmere blankets. She listened with feigned interest to his nightly accounts of fictitious business meetings, her heart a cold, hard knot in her chest. Each phone call was a fresh torment, a new layer of his betrayal. He was so convincing, so effortlessly charming, that at times a treacherous part of her wanted to believe it was all a terrible mistake. But then she would remember the words in his diary, the casual cruelty of his deception, and her resolve would harden. She was not just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for Liam. She would not let her son be raised by a man who saw him as an inconvenience, a chain around his neck. She would create a life for them that was built on honesty and integrity, a world away from the gilded cage of Julian's making. As instructed by Amara, Elena began to meticulously gather evidence. She took photos of every page of Julian's diary with her phone, uploading them to a secure cloud server that Clara had helped her set up. She made a list of all the dates he had mentioned being with Isadora, cross-referencing them with his credit card statements, which she had access to online. The statements told a story of lavish dinners in Paris, boutique hotels in Tuscany, and extravagant gifts from high-end jewelers, all disguised as business expenses. The sheer scale of his deceit was staggering. One evening, driven by a morbid curiosity she couldn't explain, she typed Isadora Duval into the search bar of her laptop. The results were immediate and jarring. Isadora Duval was not some fleeting, sordid secret. She was a person with a public profile, an art critic and journalist with a modest but respectable following. Her articles were published in niche art magazines, her social media feed a curated collection of gallery openings, intellectual musings, and travel photos. Elena's breath hitched as she scrolled through Isadora's Instagram. There she was, laughing with friends in a Parisian bistro, posing thoughtfully in front of a sculpture in Florence, her face animated and intelligent. She was beautiful, but not in the conventional, polished way of the women in Elena's social circle. She had an bohemian, intellectual air about her, a confidence that seemed to come from within, not from the validation of a wealthy man. And then, Elena saw it. A photo posted a few days ago. Isadora, silhouetted against a spectacular sunset, a turquoise ocean stretching out behind her. The caption read, "Lost in paradise. Sometimes you have to disconnect to truly connect." The location tag was unmistakable. The Maldives. A wave of nausea washed over Elena. She could see the edge of a man's arm in the corner of the photo, an arm wearing a watch that was chillingly familiar. The Patek Philippe she had given Julien for his last birthday. He hadn't even had the decency to be discreet. He was flaunting his affair, hiding in plain sight. She felt a surge of rage, so intense it made her dizzy. She wanted to comment on the photo, to expose him to the world. Having a lovely time with my husband, are you?" But she knew she couldn't. Amara's voice echoed in her head. Let him think he's in control. Instead, she took a screenshot of the photo, her hands shaking. More evidence. More fuel for the fire that was building inside her. The power imbalance in her marriage had never been clearer. Julian had not only controlled the money and the narrative, but he had also controlled her perception of reality. He had made her feel like the crazy one, the paranoid one, while he was living a completely separate life. He was the puppet master, and she had been his unwitting marionette. But the strings were starting to fray. A few days later, a package arrived. It was from Julian, another gift from Singapore. Elena opened it to find a stunning diamond necklace, a cascade of glittering stones that must have cost a fortune. The enclosed card read, "For my beautiful wife. I can't wait to see this on you. Counting the seconds until I'm home. All my love, Jay." A year ago, she would have wept with joy. Now, the diamonds felt like ice against her skin. They were not a symbol of his love, but a down payment on her silence. A bribe to keep her in her gilded cage. She put the necklace back in its box and hid it at the back of her closet. She would never wear it. The strain of her double life was beginning to take its toll. She was exhausted, emotionally and physically. The baby was getting heavier, her ankles were swollen, and she often found herself staring into space, her mind a whirlwind of anger, grief, and fear. Clara was her rock, a constant source of support and encouragement. "You're doing amazing, Elena," she said one afternoon, as they sat in the garden, a rare moment of sunshine breaking through the London gloom. "You're stronger than you think." "I don't feel strong," Elena confessed, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I feel like I'm drowning." "You're not drowning," Clara said, taking her hand. "You're learning to swim. And when Julian gets back, you're going to be ready for the tsunami." Julian was due back in 2 days. The thought filled Elena with a mixture of dread and a strange, almost giddy anticipation. The performance was almost over. The confrontation was looming. On the day of his return, Elena went about her routine with a calm that surprised even herself. She had a final meeting with Amara, who went over the strategy one last time. They had a mountain of evidence, enough to secure a very generous settlement and sole custody of the baby. "Remember," Amara said, her eyes locking with Elena's. "He will try to manipulate you. He will use your history, your emotions, your pregnancy against you. Do not let him. You are in control now." Elena went home and prepared for his arrival. She didn't dress up. She wore a simple maternity dress, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She wanted him to see her not as his glamorous wife, but as the woman he had betrayed, the mother of his child. She heard the sound of his key in the door, and her heart began to pound. He walked in, dropping his briefcase, his face lighting up when he saw her. He looked tanned and relaxed. The picture of a man returning from a successful business trip. The hypocrisy of it was breathtaking. "I'm home, my love," he said, his arms reaching for her. Elena took a step back. The movement was small, almost imperceptible, but it stopped him in his tracks. A flicker of confusion crossed his face. "Elena, what is it?" She looked at him, her gaze steady and unwavering. "We need to talk, Julian." He frowned, a hint of irritation creeping into his voice. "I just walked in the door. Can it wait?" "No," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "It can't." She led him into the drawing room, the room where Clara had comforted her, the room that had become her war room. She gestured for him to sit on one of the plush sofas. He remained standing, a sense of unease starting to radiate from him. "How was Singapore?" she asked, her voice laced with a dangerous calm. "It was fine," he said, a little too quickly. "Long, tiring, the usual." "I'm sure it was," she said. "All those late-night negotiations, The difficult clients. She paused, letting the silence stretch, the tension in the room tightening like a knot. Or was it the spa treatments and the private beach dinners that were so tiring? The color drained from his face. He stared at her, his mouth slightly agape. For the first time since she had known him, Julian Carrington was speechless. "The Ocean Pearl Resort called, Julian," she said, her voice like ice. "They had a problem with your credit card. They mentioned a Miss Isadora Duval." The mask of the loving husband, the powerful businessman, finally shattered. In its place was the face of a man caught in his own web of lies. The puppet master had lost control of his puppets. The real story, a story filled with betrayal and hidden motives, was about to be told. And for the first time, Elena would be the one holding the script. Julian stared at Elena, his face a canvas of disbelief and dawning horror. The name, Isadora Duval, hung in the air between them. An indictment that needed no further explanation. The carefully constructed world he had built, with its separate compartments for his wife and his mistress, had just come crashing down. "Elena, I can explain," he stammered, his usual smooth confidence completely deserting him. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of agitation she had never seen from him before. "Can you?" Elena's voice was devoid of emotion, a terrifying calm that was more unsettling than any scream. "Can you explain the trips to Paris and Tuscany? Can you explain the diary you kept? The one where you called our baby a trap? Or should we start with the photo of your watch on Isadora's Instagram feed, taken in the Maldives just last week?" Each question was a blow, and Julian physically flinched, his face growing paler with each revelation. He looked around the room, at the opulent surroundings that were a testament to his success, as if searching for an escape route. But there was none. He was trapped, cornered by the truth. "You read my diary?" he whispered, his voice a mixture of outrage and desperation. "I did," Elena said, her chin held high. "I also read your credit card statements. You're not just a liar, Julian. You're a cliché." The insult hit its mark. Julian's face flushed with anger. "You have no right." "No right?" Elena's voice rose, the icy calm finally cracking to reveal the raw, incandescent rage beneath. "I have no right. I am your wife, the mother of your unborn child. I have every right to know that you have been living a double life, that you have been spending our money on another woman, that you have been laughing at me behind my back." The tears she had held back for so long finally came, hot and furious. "How could you, Julian? How could you do this to me? To us? To our baby?" Her voice broke on the last word, and she wrapped her arms around her stomach, a protective shield against the man who had become a stranger to her. Seeing her tears, Julian's anger seemed to dissipate, replaced by a desperate need for damage control. This was a negotiation, a deal gone bad, and he needed to regain control. He took a step towards her, his hands outstretched. "Elena, please," he said, his voice dropping to the smooth, persuasive tone he used to close multi-million-dollar deals. "It's not what you think. Isadora, she's just a friend. It was a mistake. A stupid, meaningless mistake." "A mistake?" Elena laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk from the store. A mistake is not systematically lying to your pregnant wife for months, creating an entirely fabricated business trip so you can have a romantic getaway with your mistress." "I love you, Elena," he said, his voice thick with a sincerity that now sounded like poison to her ears. "You and the baby are my world. Isadora means nothing to me. It's over. I'll end it, right now. We can fix this. We can go to therapy. We can be a family." It was a masterful performance. The remorse, the pleading, the promises. A year ago, she would have believed him. She would have clung to his words, desperate to salvage their fairy tale. But she was not that woman anymore. She had seen behind the curtain, and she knew he was just a man pulling levers, trying to manipulate her back into her box. "No, Julian," she said, her voice regaining its strength. "We can't fix this. Because this isn't broken. It's shattered. And I'm done trying to piece together the fragments of a life that was never real." She walked over to the mahogany desk where she had placed a folder. She opened it and took out a sheaf of papers. "I've spoken to a lawyer, Julian. These are divorce papers." He stared at the papers in her hand as if they were a venomous snake. "Divorce? Elena, you can't be serious. You're pregnant. You're emotional. You're not thinking clearly." It was the exact response Amara had predicted. He was trying to gaslight her, to use her pregnancy as a weapon against her. But she was ready for it. "I have never thought more clearly in my life," she said, her voice steady. "I will not raise my son in a house built on lies. He deserves better. And so do I." Julian's face hardened, the mask of the remorseful husband falling away to reveal the ruthless businessman beneath. "You think you can just walk away from me? From this life? I will fight you, Elena. I will fight you for everything. You won't get a penny from me, and I will fight you for custody of my son." The threat hung in the air, cold and menacing. The power imbalance had never been more stark. He had the money, the connections, the army of lawyers. She had the truth. "You do that, Julian," she said, her voice trembling, but resolute. "You fight me. And when you do, this." She picked up a printed copy of his diary and threw it on the desk in front of him. "Will be submitted as evidence. Along with your credit card statements, the screenshots of Isadora's social media, and a sworn testimony from the staff at the Ocean Pearl Resort, and we will see who the court believes is a fit parent, the emotional, pregnant woman, or the narcissistic, adulterous liar." The color drained from his face as he looked at the damning evidence. He had underestimated her. He had seen her as a beautiful, passive object, an accessory to his life. He had never imagined she had the strength or the intelligence to fight back. For a long moment, there was silence. The only sound was the ticking of the antique clock on the mantelpiece, each tick a countdown to the end of their marriage. Finally, Julian sank onto the sofa, his head in his hands. He looked smaller, defeated. The puppet master had been unmasked, his strings cut. "What do you want, Elena?" he asked, his voice muffled. "I want a divorce," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I want this house. I want a settlement that will allow me to raise our son without ever having to depend on you again. And I want sole custody of Liam." He looked up at her, his eyes filled with a strange mixture of anger, despair, and something that looked almost like respect. "And what about me? Will I ever get to see my son?" The question caught her off guard. In her anger and pain, she had focused solely on protecting herself and the baby from him. She hadn't thought about what it would mean for Liam to grow up without a father. She looked at Julian, truly looked at him. For the first time since he had walked through the door, she saw not the monster she had built up in her mind, but a flawed, broken man who had made a terrible, life-altering mistake. A slow, painful emotional shift began within her. The rage was still there, a burning ember in her chest. But it was now tempered by a profound sadness. A sadness for the love they had lost, for the family they would never be, and for the man she had once loved, who had lost his way so completely. This was the beginning of the real story. Not just the story of a marriage ending, but the story of what came next. The story of two people, bound together by a child, who had to find a new way to exist in each other's lives. The psychological conflict was far from over, and the path to redemption, for both of them, would be long and arduous. But in that moment, in the ruins of their shattered life, Elena knew one thing for certain. She was free. and she would never be anyone's puppet again. The weeks that followed the confrontation were a blur of legal meetings, tense phone calls, and a heavy, oppressive silence in the once lively Holland Park house. Julian moved out, retreating to a luxury hotel, a sterile environment that seemed to suit the hollowed-out man he had become. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly swift. Faced with the mountain of irrefutable evidence Elena and Amara had compiled, Julian's high-priced lawyers advised him to settle. The fight went out of him, replaced by a weary resignation. Elena got the house, a generous financial settlement that secured her and Liam's future, and most importantly, sole custody of their son. Julian was granted supervised visitation rights, a clause that felt both like a victory and a profound sorrow. The day the divorce was finalized, Elena didn't feel the elation she had expected. There was only a vast empty space where her old life used to be. She was free, but she was also adrift. She wandered through the grand, silent rooms, the expensive art and furniture now feeling like relics from another woman's life. She was no longer Mrs. Julian Carrington. She was just Elena Marlowe. And she had to figure out who that was. Her sister Clara was her lifeline, a constant presence in the quiet house. She helped Elena pack up Julian's belongings, each tailored suit and pair of expensive shoes, a painful reminder of the man she had loved, the life she had lost. "Are you okay?" Clara asked, finding Elena sitting on the floor of Julian's walk-in closet, clutching one of his old university sweatshirts, the fabric soft and worn. "I don't know," Elena whispered, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I hate him for what he did, but I also miss the man I thought he was." It was the paradox of grief. She was mourning a man who was still alive, a love that had been both real and a lie. The slow emotional shifts were disorienting. A constant push and pull between anger and sadness, resentment, and a lingering, unwanted affection. A few weeks later, Elena gave birth to Liam. He was a beautiful, healthy baby with a tuft of dark hair and his father's whiskey-colored eyes. The moment she held him in her arms, the chaos and the pain of the past few months seemed to recede. A fierce, all-consuming love washed over her, a love so pure and powerful, it left her breathless. This was her purpose now. This was her world. Julian came to the hospital, his presence awkward and tentative. He brought a ridiculously large teddy bear and a bouquet of roses, a gesture that felt both sweet and painfully misguided. He looked at Liam, his son, with a sense of wonder and a profound, heartbreaking sadness. He's perfect," he stammered, his voice thick with emotion. He reached out a hesitant hand to touch Liam's tiny fingers. Elena watched him, her heart a battlefield of conflicting emotions. She saw the regret in his eyes, the genuine pain of a man who had lost everything that mattered. For the first time, she saw beyond her own hurt and glimpsed the wreckage of his life. The first few months of Liam's life were a whirlwind of sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, and a love that grew more profound with each passing day. Elena found a strength she never knew she possessed. She was a mother, and that identity was more real, more powerful than any she had ever known. Julian's visits were a regular, stilted affair. He was a ghost in their lives, a visitor in the home he had once owned. He was awkward with Liam at first, unsure how to hold him, how to soothe him. But Elena, for Liam's sake, gently guided him, showing him how to support the baby's head, how to burp him after a feeding. In these small, shared moments of parenthood, a fragile, tentative truce began to form between them. One afternoon, as Julian was getting ready to leave, he turned to Elena, his eyes full of a pain that seemed to go beyond the divorce. "I saw her," he said, his voice low. "Isadora." Elena's heart clenched. She hadn't thought about Isadora in months. She was a ghost from another lifetime. She's with someone else. Julian continued, a bitter smile on his lips. A penniless artist. She told me she never loved me. She loved the lifestyle I gave her, the access to a world she could write about. She said I was an experience. The irony was not lost on Elena. Julian, who had accused her of only loving his money, had been used for that very thing by his mistress. The hidden motives were finally laid bare. Isadora was not the free-spirited intellectual who understood his soul. She was a calculating woman who had seen an opportunity and taken it. "I'm sorry, Julian," Elena said, and to her surprise, she meant it. "Don't be," he said, shaking his head. "I deserved it. I lost everything because I was chasing a fantasy. I had everything right here." His gaze fell on Liam, sleeping peacefully in his bassinet, and then on Elena. "And I destroyed it." It was the first time he had taken full responsibility, without excuses or justifications. It was not a plea for forgiveness, but a simple statement of fact. And in that moment, something shifted between them. The anger that had been a constant hum in Elena's heart began to soften, to be replaced by a reluctant, complex empathy. The path to redemption is not a straight line. It is a messy, complicated journey of fits and starts, of progress and setbacks. For Julian, it began with that confession. He started going to therapy, not to win Elena back, but to understand the man he had become, the emptiness inside him that had led him to seek validation in the arms of another woman. He started to focus on being a father, not just a visitor. He learned Liam's schedule, his favorite lullabies, the funny little gurgles he made when he was happy. For Elena, redemption was a different kind of journey. It was about rediscovering herself, separate from any man. She started taking online courses in art history, reigniting a passion she had long neglected. She reconnected with old friends who had known her before she was Mrs. Julian Carrington. She started to build a new life, a life that was smaller, quieter, but infinitely more authentic than the one she had left behind. She and Julian never got back together. The trust was too broken, the wounds too deep. But they found a new way to be a family, a modern, fractured family, bound by their shared love for their son. They attended parent-teacher conferences together, celebrated Liam's birthdays together, and navigated the challenges of co-parenting with a hard-won grace and respect. Years later, Elena was at a gallery opening, a small independent show she had helped curate. She was talking to an artist when she saw Julian across the room. He was with Liam, now a boisterous 5-year-old, who was pointing excitedly at a large, colorful painting. Julian looked different. The sharp, ruthless edge was gone, replaced by a softer, more contented look. He caught her eye and smiled, a genuine, warm smile that held no trace of the past. Elena smiled back. The life she had now was not the one she had dreamed of all those years ago. It was better. It was real. She had been through the fire of betrayal and had emerged not unscathed, but stronger, wiser, and more herself than she had ever been. She had found her own power, her own voice, and her own happily ever after, one that she had written for herself. The gilded cage was a distant memory. She was free, and in her freedom she had found a deeper, more meaningful kind of wealth. She had found herself, and that was a treasure no millionaire could ever buy. The story of Elena Marlowe and Julian Carrington is a journey through the darkest corners of betrayal and the slow, arduous path to redemption. It's a reminder that the lives we see on the surface are often far more complex underneath, filled with hidden motives and silent struggles. If Elena's story of resilience and finding her own strength resonated with you, please give this video a thumbs up to let us know. Don't forget to share it with someone who might need to hear this message of hope and empowerment. And for more emotional stories that feel like real life, make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Thank you for watching, and remember, even after the most devastating storms, the sun will find a way to shine again. What did you think of Elena's final decision? Let us know in the comments below.